earlier, the ask was that we stop our purchases of Russian crude oil. But now with the formal sanctions, it would be difficult to transact with them, make payments, which would lead to legal hurdles in procuring crude from these two companies. We could alternately source this crude from, say, Middle East, which is quite geographically quite close to India, and or say the other sources like Africa, US, etc. So on Friday, just before the weekend, the crude oil prices were about $60 per barrel, 60, 61, somewhere in that range, and today they are already about 80, 65. So there has been some reaction.
We've also seen that European Union has also placed sanctions on Nayara Energy, which is again an Indian refiner. Are we likely to see this more and more going forward?
So ultimately, it was about reducing the crude oil, imports from Russia, which could be achieved by this. In case there are no ways and means around this, maybe for other measures, I mean, we'll have to wait and see.
Hello and welcome back to the HT Podcast. I'm your host, Shashank Mattoo, reporting to you from Washington, D.C. If you've seen the news, you've seen that the United States has sanctioned two major Russian energy companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, in an effort to strangle Russia's energy revenues. But both companies do billions of dollars in business with India. And these new sanctions could have major implications for the Indian economy and where we get our energy. Joining me to discuss this is Prashant Vasisht, Senior Vice President at the ICRA, who tracks energy extremely closely. I've been in touch with Mr. Vasisht for several years to help me make sense of what's going on in the Indian economy and in terms of where we get our energy and our energy security. Mr. Vasisht, thank you so much. Glad that we could do this on the podcast, our first conversation over video, although we've had several in the past over the years. Could I ask you to begin by explaining this to us? How big exactly are Rosneft and Lukoil? Why are these two companies so important to the Indian economy and so important that the US Treasury has now gone after them with sanctions?
So Rosneft alone accounts for about half of the Russian crude oil exports. And likewise, Lukoil is also a very big player. From the perspective of India, about 60% of our crude imports currently are from these two companies out of the total imports from Russia.
Mm-hmm. And now we've done billions of dollars in business with Rosneft and Lukoil. We've seen, of course, Reliance Energy last year sign a major long-term agreement with Rosneft. Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing now today with the US Treasury coming out with these sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil. What exactly do these sanctions mean? And what will the implications be for these two companies?
So this will significantly impact the Indian, purchases of crude oil from Russia, given that now these have been formally sanctioned by the US. Earlier, the ask was that we stop our purchases of Russian crude oil. But now with the formal sanctions, it would be difficult to, transact with them, make payments, which would lead to legal hurdles in procuring crude from these two companies.
Right. And as I understand it, looking at the notification that the US Treasury put out, there's also a sense that secondary sanctions could be levied against companies that do business with Rosneft and Lukoil. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, possibly these could be in legal crosshairs of the US as per US laws, which could make it difficult to transact with these companies for companies that are outside of US or within US.
Right. And you're already saying that we're likely to see some sort of reduction in how much energy is purchased from Russian suppliers. Is it that Indian refineries are just going to move to non-sanctioned Russian entities? Are they going to try looking for suppliers from the Middle East, other parts of the world? What's going to happen exactly?
So I believe the crude oil supplies from these two entities would be impacted. I believe our refiners are looking at the print, very scrutinizing the print, and are looking at ways and means of complying. And this could, however, possibly have an impact on the Indian purchases of crude oil, since we don't really have been purchasing, any commodities from sanctioned entities.
Right. And, could you tell us a little bit about the impact this could have on the Indian economy more broadly? There has been a lot of discussion. We've had those discussions as well about whether India can move to other suppliers of energy. And there has been a debate about this. People are saying that, look, there is a discount that we get when we buy Russian energy. It's also true that Indian refineries get more output, more distillate output when they use Russian inputs and Russian crude. How much is this going to impact the Indian economy? Is a marginal impact, not that much. We've also heard that discounts when you buy Russian energy have also declined. So, what does this mean for the Indian economy? Is this are the Indian refiners the losers in this transaction, in this sanctions?
Yes, because see, the crude oil, the discounts on the Russian crude were quite marginal now, at about $2 or below. And if you look at the overall import bill for 36% of the purchases that we do from Russia, this would not have a very overarching, a very large impact. It would increase the crude oil import bill by just about below by less than 2%. Which is not very much. And for the oil marketing companies, particularly, this would they make the healthy margins on the marketing side would somewhat would help in these, would support the profitability for whatever is the foregone discounts on Russian crude. Now, coming to your next question, we could alternately source this crude from say Middle East, which is quite geographically quite close to India, and or say the other sources like Africa, US, etc.
Right. And, we've already seen that oil prices have risen after the announcement of the US Treasury sanctions. We've also seen what happens when oil from a particular source gets knocked off. This was always the concern when it came to sanctioning Russian energy producers, that if you push them out of the market, then the price of oil will spike. We've seen a short spike in the days after the announcement was made. Are we likely to see oil prices increase significantly if the American intention is to push Russian oil out of the market? What exactly is happening here?
Yeah, so on Friday, just before the weekend, the crude oil prices were about $60 per barrel, 60, 61, somewhere in that range. And today they are already about 80, 65. So there has been some reaction in case this the sanctions are very tight and this oil gets pushed out of the market. Considering that this is a substantial quantity, there could be an upward pressure on the crude oil prices. So significantly, this impacts the overall crude oil prices also globally.
Right. And, we've also seen that it's not just the Americans who've come out with these sanctions. The UK as well went after Rosneft and Lukoil, the exact same two companies that we're talking about. They have also, the European Union is imposing a new sanctions package against Russia. We've also seen that European Union has also placed sanctions on Nayara Energy, which is again an Indian refiner. Are we likely to see this more and more going forward, which is that there is going to be more pressure on the Indian energy sector from Western countries?
So I think a large part of the objective of pushing these out could be achieved by this very measure itself. And so ultimately, it was about reducing the crude oil, imports from Russia, which could be achieved by this. In case there are no ways and means around this, maybe for other measures, I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I'm not exactly sure how that could pan out.
Right. And, if I could ask, we also, the other equation, of course, is the Chinese state-owned enterprises that are also buying a lot of oil from the Russians. What I've spoken to from people over here is that they're saying that the impact of the sanctions will also depend on how the Chinese respond to this new sanctions announcement. Would you agree with that generally, that if the Chinese continue to buy Russian energy, then the impact of the sanctions on Russian oil revenues will actually be quite muted?
Yes, in case China concomitantly increases imports, while India reduces, the end goal would probably be not fully achieved.
Right. And, there's this concern, I think, that came out when, after the Ukraine war, for example, broke out, India went to its traditional purchasers, its traditional sellers of oil to continue to buy energy. But then, of course, there was a sense that European nations were going to a lot of those producers in, for example, the Middle East, and that had raised the price of oil, more demand chasing the same oil. And that had, of course, hurt India's economic prospects, because of which we turned to buying more Russian oil. If the American intention is to push Russian oil out of the market, are we actually likely to see oil prices continue to spike in a way that actually harms the Indian economy? Or is that an overblown concern?
No, so that would harm practically all the economies globally. It would increase energy inflation, increase gas prices because they are also linked for a large part of the gas that is traded to crude. So yes, it would have a detrimental impact. Now, where would prices stop would depend upon a host of other factors, including the demand supply scenario, etc. So pushing out that much oil, would certainly have some impact. Now, where do exactly prices land up? We'll have to see.
Right. And you've also said this. I think we were having this conversation before we got into this interview, which was that you actually said that you generally expect Indian companies to comply with these sanctions. You said that you don't think of Indian companies as too adventurous when it comes to lifting sanctions, unlike their Chinese counterparts sometimes.
Yeah, so Indian companies have mostly, always complied with U.S. sanctions. Till now, the sanctions were not there as such, and there was generally an ask by the U.S. government. But I think this puts it actually in a legal framework, which makes it legally binding as per U.S. law. So if we want to trade, if we want to transact, it will be that much more difficult.
Right. And we've also seen in the past that Russia has a history, at least, of trying to circumvent those sanctions, working with countries like China, using its shadow fleet. Will Russia try to evade these new measures? Could they be effective in trying to evade these US sanctions that have come up?
So difficult to say because it's easier to arrange a fleet rather than change the producer here. So I am not very sure. I mean, how this can be achieved here. Yeah.
Right. And I think, Mr. Vasisht, then my last question is, the energy relationship with Russia is important. What do you see as the midterm future of what's happening in the energy relationship over the next couple of years? We've, of course, ramped up our purchases in the last couple of years. Do you see purchases even within the relationship? Will they drop? Will they halve? Will they drop nearly to zero, as President Trump is saying? Or will India try to do business with other Russian refiners, other subsidiaries that have not yet been sanctioned?
Yeah, so there are a number of other oil companies also, and we still 40% of the Russian crude that we purchase is from other entities. So I don't think that until unless those are sanctioned, we would stop purchasing from those. It should not come to a grinding halt till these entities are also sanctioned. So and how does it pan out in the future? We'll have to see basis some geopolitical developments, which would be difficult to predict at this point in time.
Understood. Prashant Vasisht of ICRA joining us to explain the energy markets, how exactly these new US sanctions impact India, and its extremely crucial energy relationship with Russia. Mr. Vasisht, thank you so much for joining us on the HT podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.